Long before the high desert took a breath, the blueprint was drawn on Central Avenue.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Unlisted Map. I'm Mary. Today's story is about three women history left off the map. I do hope you enjoy listening to their story, and thanks for following along. And I do hope to see you in the Unlisted Pairing. Cheers!
Long before the world knew her name, they called her Little Louie. But Valaida Snow wasn't just imitating the greats, she was. Born into a theatrical family in Chattanooga, Tennessee, Valaida was a child prodigy raised on the road. By the time she was just 15 years old, she had mastered an astonishing 10 instruments, including the cello, bass, violin, banjo, harp, accordion, clarinet, saxophone, and trumpet. She could sing, she could dance, and when she locked her lips around a brass horn, she commanded the room. She ultimately chose the trumpet as her weapon of choice, blowing hot, soaring jazz that earned her the ultimate title, the Queen of Trumpet, a moniker given to her by the legendary W.C. Handy. Louis Armstrong himself acknowledged her sheer brilliance, famously calling her Little Louie and declaring her the second best jazz trumpet player in the world, placing only himself ahead of her. Throughout the 1930s, Valaida was the toast of London, Paris, and Shanghai. But her life offstage was just as intense and high stakes as her performances. Her romantic life was a whirlwind of high profile, often controversial relationships, including a high profile marriage to dancer Annalise Berry of the famous Berry Brothers, and a lifestyle deeply embedded in the fast, glamorous, and sometimes perilous underground circuits of international show business. When World War II broke out, Valaida made the fateful decision to remain touring in Europe. By 1941, while performing in German occupied Denmark, her world came crashing down. Though post war publicity and press myth making later romanticized her capture as a direct political imprisonment by the Nazis, the harsher reality documented by historians was that she was arrested by authorities in Copenhagen under the accusation of theft and legal drug use. She was thrown into Vestry Fængsel, the western prison in Copenhagen. Danish authorities ultimately transferred her to a prison hospital ward, shielding her from the worst fates of the camps until she was finally released in May of 1942. Prisoner exchange and return to the United States. Biographers and historians later uncovered she was in custody a total of 10 weeks between the jail and hospital. She survived the ordeal, though she was physically and emotionally fractured. Yet, true to her indomitable spirit, when she stepped back onto American soil, she refused to stay down. On September 23, 1945, she made a triumphant return, commanding a crowd of 15,000 screaming fans at the historic first annual Cavalcade of Jazz at Los Angeles' Wrigley Field. Valaida Snow was flawed, fierce, and fiercely talented, a true survivor who played life entirely on her own terms. Long before Hollywood knew how to handle black stardom, a teenager from Lancaster, South Carolina, stepped onto the silver screen and electrified the entire industry. Her name was Nina Mae McKinney. In 1929, legendary director King Vidor cast the 22-year-old as the sensational fiery lead in Metro Goldwyn Mayer's Hallelujah, one of the very first all-black feature films from a major Hollywood studio. Overnight, Nina was in sensations. Critics dubbed her the Black Garbo, praising her unmatched magnetism, screen presence, and raw talent. Audiences had never seen anything quite like her. But that early lightning in a bottle moment in Hallelujah quickly turned into a battle against an industry built to sideline her. They called the 1935 musical reckless.
But for Nina, the title was a cruel joke. Despite massive hype in papers like the California Eagle, Hollywood proved truly reckless with her career, quietly cutting her scenes and tossing her talent aside. Hollywood, bound tightly by the rigid racial codes of the Jim Crow era, wasn't ready to let a black woman shine as a leading lady. Instead of building on her historic debut, the studio system relegated her to bit parts, uncredited maid roles, or exhausticized background numbers, often cutting her musical scenes entirely so Southern theater owners could easily excise them. Fed up with industry that wanted her name for promotion but refused to let her shine, Nina packed her bags and took her brilliance across the Atlantic. Europe welcomed her with open arms. She conquered Parisian cabaret stages, starred in major British theatrical productions, and in 1936 made television history by starring in a BBC broadcast, becoming one of the very first African American performers ever to appear on British television. But the relentless pace of the road abroad exacted a heavy toll. While touring the UK, she reached a breaking point, suffering a severe physical collapse on an Irish stage. To make a heartbreaking situation worse, while she was recovering in a London nursing home, her husband skipped town to Paris, cleaning out her accounts and leaving her with empty pockets. She proved that her brilliance wasn't confined by American borders, even if her home country was too narrow minded to claim her. Eventually looking for a place to breathe away from the noise, the heartbreak, and the grinding spotlight, Nina found her way out to the high desert sanctuary of Murray's Dude Ranch in Apple Valley, a quiet space where black trailblazers could drop the armor. Right here in the area, spots like Murray's Dude Ranch became legendary. For a global superstar like Nina, who spent her life navigating a racially divided entertainment world, a place like Murray's represented a rare kind of peace. Here she wasn't an exoticized novelty or a restricted star. She could kick off her boots, catch her breath, and simply exist. The weight of a lifetime spent fighting systemic barriers took its toll, and she passed away far too young in New York in 1967 at just 54. But long after the studios tried to leave her on the cutting room floor, Nina Mae McKinney's fire remains unmatchable. To understand the full scope of these women, how their triumphs were documented, how their safe havens were protected, and how their struggles were brought into the light, we have to turn the pages to the woman who watched over them all, Charlotta Bass. As the fierce, unyielding editor and publisher of the California Eagle, the oldest black owned newspaper on the West Coast, Carlotta was an institution. She was older, wiser, and possessed a razor sharp pen that she wielded like a sword against racial injustice. Carlotta didn't just report the news, she curated the community. If you look back through the archives of the California Eagle, you'll find Murray's Dude Ranch plastered across its pages, week after week, edition after edition. Carlotta championed Noli and Leela Murray's Apple Valley Oasis. She understood that a sanctuary like Murray's, where black artists, Hollywood stars, and everyday travelers could breathe free under the high desert sun, was just as vital to document as the political battles raging in the courts. She made sure the world knew that this desert refuge existed. But Carlotta's vision of justice didn't stop at the newsroom desk or the society pages. She spent decades on the front line of the civil rights movement, fighting housing discrimination, labor exploitation, and police brutality in Los Angeles. And then came 1952. Long before the glass ceiling was cracked by modern history, long before Kamala Harris took the oath as vice president, Carlotta Bass did the unthinkable.
She stepped onto the national stage as the vice presidential candidate for the Progressive Party, running alongside Vincent Hallinan. Think about the sheer magnitude of that moment. An unapologetic woman, a pioneering West Coast publisher, asking the American electorate to put her in the second highest office in the land. Though they didn't win, Charlotta Bass broke open a door that could never be shut again. From the smoky jazz clubs of Europe to the sunlit trails of the high desert ranch, and all the way to the steps of the White House, these women didn't just live through history, they wrote it.
Hi everyone and welcome to the Unlisted Pairing. I hope you liked today's story about three dynamic women, Valaida Snow, Charlotta Bass, and Mae McKinney. Who knew, because I didn't, that we had the first black woman run for vice president who wasn't Kamala Harris, but for the Progressive Party. I didn't know in 1950. That is incredible. And because of these dynamic women, I was wondering what wine would pair well. Well, normally I would go for a bold red. And I found something that's not exactly bold. It's more of a medium bodied. But I found CK Mondavi's red blend. Not sure what the vintage is, but the label mentions that it has a soft red currant, ripe raspberry, and sweet mission fig notes. And it's silky, medium bodied and silky. And actually when I smell this luscious red, to me it's pretty luscious. I am actually picking up these red fruits. And I wanted to pair it with something just like the women who are bold and daring. So I came up with some briny olives because originally when I did smell this red, it almost smelled like olives to me. So I thought, oh, let's try pairing that. I got some dried fruit because of the mission figs, and the smoky almond, and I actually found jalapeño popper dip. And so these were all very bold flavors for a very medium body and silky wine. But just like those three women of California, this California red blend matches and pairs so well with their story. I do hope that you enjoyed it, and I do hope to look for you again on the Unlisted Map, where we will go and explore other places and maybe even try some different wines in the Unlisted Pairing. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.